What's up, Amazon sellers? Today, I'm super excited to interview someone that I've been following for some time. But the one thing which I'm really interested in is about learning about his thoughts behind systems, teams, outsourcing, scaling his business to 7 figures, and where he is going, because it's probably not the usual route that you might be thinking. If you're interested to learn more about mindset behind scaling, then stay tuned. I'm obviously going to hear all about this in a minute. Okay, so today I'm super excited to be here with Oliver Flips, and I'm really interested to learn about his team, what he's doing, and what's changed quite recently. So, Oliver, thank you so much for joining me and obviously taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you've got a lot going on personally and also professionally as well. But if anyone doesn't know who you are, can you give us a little rundown about a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, sure. So my first name, many people don't know, is Joseph. I tell the story when I started my Twitter account, Joseph Flips was taken. And I even tried to buy it from the guy who had it, he was not even using it. He said no. So I said, all right, Oliver Flips sounds cooler. But yeah, Joseph is my first name, but a lot of people call me Oliver. So in April of 2020, I was suddenly let go on a random Tuesday from my job, and the US was under lockdown. So I had no idea what to do, applied to a bunch of jobs, 130 to be exact. And then with all my savings running out, because I didn't have much, I decided I've got to do something kind of radical. I got to do something. I have to create my own money somehow. Like, nobody's hiring me. And I discovered through Twitter, actually, people were flipping stuff. They bought it at the store, selling it on eBay, selling it on Amazon. And I thought, okay, I've got very little to lose right now. If I spend some money and it doesn't work, I'll just run out of money faster and I'll be in the same place eventually. So I took a chance, and it was a success. So here we are. Yeah.
So obviously you've been selling, you said April 2020 that you lost your job. So if I'm doing the maths, it's kind of like what, nearly 2 years, just under, like a year and a half? Is that right?
I started my LLC in July of 2020, and this 2023 is going to be my third full year. So we're coming up on, about 3 years now, but this will be the third full year.
Fantastic. Sorry, I just realized my maths was completely off then. I was like a year and a half, like, oh my God. We're supposed to know numbers as Amazon.
No, I kind of for some reason, my brain got jumbled with it too when you asked. So.
Question for you, obviously that's the background. Where are you now? Let me ask you the question, what's the model that you're doing? Can I ask revenue wise? And is it all yourself or is it a team? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so we have in 2020, there's kind of some overlap because I started on eBay. That was where the fast money was at. I didn't know anything about Amazon when I started. So I started selling on eBay, already had an account. Back when I first married my wife, so this was 2012, I discovered, and it's funny, there's another guy that does this now, but in 2012, I discovered you could buy people's broken iPhones and then sell them on eBay or fix them. So I taught myself using YouTube how to fix iPhones. And then I discovered that you could take the components out, and people overseas would pay huge money for the motherboard of an iPhone 4 and stuff like that. It was a while back, because this was the iPhone 3 and 4 that I was buying, and I would pay $5 for an iPhone, and they're like, oh, I thought this was worthless. And then I could part out the components and sell them for $100 on eBay. So I'd had this eBay account forever, and that's how I had it. And then in 2016, I had an automotive business, and so I discovered you could sell used DVDs on Amazon. So I opened an Amazon account, and it was so easy to get on Amazon in 2016. It was like nothing. So I had this account. It wasn't even inactive for some reason, and I hadn't sold on it for years, but it was just sitting there. So I start reselling. I'm like, well, I've already got the eBay account. I didn't realize I was going to do Amazon at the time, but I already had an Amazon account. So to get to your question, I did from July to December in my first year, I did 150,000 on eBay, and then I did 40,000 on Amazon. So at the time, because the eBay, this was 2020, we were slinging weights, and I missed pools, but weights were huge profit, huge revenue. I was just multiplying my money selling weights and shipping them priority mail. When I talk to people now about starting on Amazon, I always have to say it's a little bit different, because that was instant money. If you sold dumbbells on eBay at this time and you could ship them yourself, it was instant money, and that got me through the first 6 months. I was only a couple of months into eBay and slinging these dumbbells, and it was dragging 200 pounds of weights to the post office every day. It was ridiculous. And I just thought to myself, okay, this is not gonna last. Even if it did, I really don't want to do all this weightlifting every single day and packaging weights. It was just a ton of work. But eventually the world will go back to some semblance of normal. Everybody who wants dumbbells will have bought them, and this will run out. So what is the thing, if this works, what is the thing that is going to be like my thing? And that's when I thought, okay, it's Amazon. So I found a guy, well, I came in touch, so I'll name drop some people. Joe Hart, who's a good friend of mine, he's the reason that I started flipping. Like, honestly, I was on Twitter. I discovered people on Twitter while I was at my 9 to 5, like Jose Rosado, Chris Johnson, CJ with Welt Squad. And I kind of was lurking in money Twitter because these people were doing really interesting things. I hate my 9 to 5. Like, how do I get out of here? And man, you asked for revenue, and like I'm going into my life story. But I think there's some good stuff here. So I'm gonna keep going. So Joe Hart was kind of in this like money Twitter circle, like all the OGs, Jose Rosado, Lawrence King, you know, all the people that you know of that have been on forever, Ajax in the fitness crowd. And Joe Hart was on there, and I remember I've been laid off, and I bought Joe Hart's flipping course, and it might have been like 15 or 20 bucks, like it was a sale, and I was like, and that felt like, so I've got limited money in the bank account, no income, the world's under lockdown. Spending just 15 or 20 bucks felt like an enormous amount of money because I can't, like, am I going to get that money back? Am I just throwing it away? And it's funny to think about my mindset now. If I have to spend 20 bucks on a resource or a tool now, it's like, I mean, I'm not rich, but it's like nothing because I know that I'm making that decision from a place where I can get a return on that. So it's the forward thinking. So I bought that. I'm like, okay, this is good. I'm trying it out, but I think there's more to know here. And so he had this group, and at the time it was 50 bucks a month. Now I'm feeling like, 50, I'm going to pay 50 bucks to join a group. It was the most foreign concept ever. But I joined it, and in that group was a guy named Greg Webb, and a lot of people know him as Toyfolio on Twitter. And he is a buy and hold guy. He started on Amazon doing like quick flipping things. The first thing he sold was red velvet cake mix. I remember that from his book. But he got into buy and hold toys because it was easier, it was simpler. It was just a patience thing. Greg's a very patient guy. And he was on Amazon. His thing was Amazon. So that's the moment I said, I've got to get on Amazon. As soon as I knew I wanted to be on Amazon, I did it. Like, I made an LLC, I got my tax exemption, I got on my Amazon account, and then I started thinking, what am I even going to do on here? And the first thing I ever sold on Amazon, I was in Walmart trying to find things to sell on eBay, and I found these ballpoint pens, refills. And they were like $1.50 a piece. And I scanned them with my seller app, just like you see people doing, which I almost now I'm like, this doesn't even work. But at the time I scanned it with my seller app, like, oh, these are selling for like $9. And I had no idea what rank was. I knew I could sell them, but there were, let's see, 20, there were like 20 or 25 of them. And I thought, so now I'm going to spend 120 bucks on pen refills. I had trouble spending $20 on a course and $50 on a group. Now I'm going to drop 122 bucks on pen refills, and I don't even know if they'll sell. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I just thought, okay, whatever. So I bought them all. And then I even tried to negotiate with the store manager over pen refills because I thought I need these lower. Like, what if I buy them all? They're like, no, we won't do it. So I get home, still no idea what I'm doing, create a shipment, don't have any labels, throw them in a box. I say, Amazon, label these for me. And those things ended up like flying. I remember when my first sales came in, it's like $8. And I'm like, like I did it, you know? But so anyway, back to the revenue question. That's the genesis story. That's how I started selling on eBay. eBay was weights, Amazon was pen refills. I did 40,000 on Amazon, 150,000 on eBay. It was really, really profitable because of the weights and because in August I was kind of like maxing out my credit cards, buying clearance toys, which I made like 100-200% on that December because this is still COVID time. So I was able to get off to a really great start. The next year, I was fully focused on Amazon. I did 70,000 on eBay because I was still keeping that as a revenue source, and I did just over 400,000 on Amazon. So that was 2021. And then January of 2022, I said, okay, 400. I'm kind of thinking like maybe I want to go to 800,000. Like, what's realistic? And somebody told me, I don't remember who it was, but somebody told me like you could definitely do over $1 million if you tried. And it felt impossible, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna do 1.2 million this year. And I remember I made a video, I put it on Instagram, and I said, I'm gonna do $1 million this year. It's the public accountability, right? And so I spent that January and February. I finished about 18% net margins. I hired a big team over the summer. A lot of that's changed. We'll talk about that later. I was doing things like providing leads lists and things like that. I ended up just saying I want to focus mostly on Amazon. And this year, my stretch goal, somebody else told me, I said, all right, I want to do 2.4 million this year. I'm going to double it. Somebody said, no, go for 3.5. And I'm like, same feeling as last year where I'm like, this is impossible. But that's where I'm at. I want to do over 3 million this year. And so here we are.
Wow.
It kind of makes sense if you think about it. Like, things do change as you get bigger. But from 6 months to my first full year, I 10x'd my revenue while still being really profitable. Like, I wasn't making 200% ROI on everything, but times changed. So it does make sense to go for those bigger goals. Like, then I almost 3x'd my revenue in the next year, still really profitable. So why couldn't I 3x it this year? It kind of makes sense.
I love your ambition. Question for you. You didn't. So you said the goal was to do 1.2 in 2022. What did you actually achieve, if you don't mind asking?
1.12.
You're going to hate me for saying that. You're like, damn, I didn't make it.
That's
Hey,
fine.
honestly, like, it's incredible.
I mean, I didn't think breaking 7 figures was possible in January, but I said, if it is, I'm going to do it. And then I just made a plan and I stuck to my daily goal. And so, I mean, I was really happy with 1.12. If I had put my foot on the gas harder during Q4, I definitely could have hit 1.2. But it was intentional that I slowed down, and I'm not upset at that decision.
A question for you: are you still doing eBay?
Oh man, like 10,000 a year. It's kind of just where the stuff goes to die.
Yeah,
like
so all your returns and
a listing gets taken down. I don't, in the beginning, a lot of stuff, I like the hot flips were cool. Limited edition sneakers or limited drops and limited edition this or that, like all the cook type items. And I don't like eBay because I don't like to ship my own stuff, pretty much. It's fine. It's a good outlet for other things. And I still sell, like, a lot of my merchandise, I can even break even on it that comes back because it's only like the listing got removed, or Amazon said, you know, this label is European, you can't sell it, or something like that.
Question for you. You talked about, like, first things first, well done, like, absolutely amazing. You know, should we say 40,000 on Amazon, 400,000, 1.12 million, and then obviously now you're looking to do 2.4 to maybe 3.5. Wow, like, honestly, really, really well done. You talked about it. So long as I hit my daily goals, what does that mean? Like, if someone right now is like, I want to do what you're doing, but you're talking about, like, I just need to hit my daily goals. What does that mean?
Okay, so if I in January, when I said I'm going to do 1.2 million from 400,000 the previous year, that's overwhelming. And you kind of start to think about how much I'll have to sell and how much I'll have to buy and how much I'll have to find and all the problems. And there was a lot of that. There was a lot of buying and a lot of selling and a lot of problems, right? But I said, okay, and I tweeted how to do this. It's really rough math, but it works. So I said, if you want to make $1 million in a year, then you break that down and do some really simple math and say, well, that means this much a month. And if my criteria is I'm not buying anything that's at least 30% ROI, then you say, okay, if I take, I mean, the way that I do it, because I'm kind of like okay at math, but I can just say, okay, if I take $1,000 to spend and I make 30% ROI, that's about $1,300. And Amazon's going to take a third of my sales and I'm selling it for this much. And so I have to spend, and then I get to a number and I'm like, well, this is how much I would have to sell a day. And then if you multiply this by 365, then you get your final number. And you kind of I just play with it and move the numbers up and down and find that sweet spot where, okay, this will get me to my goal. It's better in the thread because I was actually saying this is exactly how you do the math. And now I'm blanking because you've asked me on video. Sticking to the day-to-day, if I sat here and I said I have to do 3 million this year, that's like astronomical to me. To other people, that's like a Tuesday, right? But to me, that's big. So from the minute I set my daily goal, I never once thought about the million. It literally just happened. I woke up one day and I'm like, oh, I'm at 995,000. I mean, literally, I never watched my goal. I never watched the main end goal. I only watched the daily goal. And that was, I have to spend this much on average every day in order to sell this much on average every day and get this amount of profit. And if I do that every day, then I will hit my goal. It's math. Like, if you do that, it's almost impossible to not win if you set the daily goal. And I did it. And all you have to do, like, it's so easy to sit down. If your goal is I have to spend at least $6,000 a day to hit 3 million in sales, then all you have to do is All you have to do is spend $6,000 today. You don't have to worry about spending like $1 million because that's impossible. I don't have $1 million, you know? And it's the same way. I posted a tweet this morning. So 2 years ago, I was like, okay, I'm having a bunch of kids. I'm lean-ish, but I kind of want to like look like an actor that can take his shirt off for movie roles. Like I want to have a nice physique, right? My family, I don't have like great genetics or anything like that. And I just didn't want to get in this place where I'm out of shape, and every single year I'm like, all right, just 20 more pounds to go and I'm back to my college weight or whatever. Like I hear people, they say that every single year until they're like 65 and then they just give up. I was like, no, I want to get in shape. And so it took me 2 years to get to where now I'm like flexing for my kids and wife in the living room because I'm like, look at these, you know? And I'm not like super jacked, but it took me 2 years, and all I had to do was go to the gym for 40 minutes a day. And so it was that daily goal. I don't go to the gym, well, I kind of do, thinking about like, I want to look like Brad Pitt from Troy, right? I'm not really thinking about that because it feels impossible because I'm like skinny and I've got like a flat tire around my, I've got the tire. All I thought about was I just have to do this set. And if I do this set 500 times in the next 2 years, I will get my result. And I eat like protein, and drink lots of water. It's breaking it down into that daily goal creates something that you can do. Like I can't transform from skinny fat dad bod to Achilles. I can't do it, but I can just go to the gym every day and do the things that I believe will take me there. And then eventually you're there. You just like wake up one day and you're like, whoa, like I've got shoulders now, I didn't have it before. Same thing with, anything you want to do in life. It's not just Amazon. Just say, okay, like I want to have 20 rental properties. I don't have any rental properties, by the way. I don't know anything about it. But you can't really have 20 before you have one. So just figure out what you have to do. Like, okay, I want to have 20. What's a logical, reasonable way to acquire 20, and how long will it take? And then you just do the first step. That was a rant.
No, I love it.
Sorry, but
no, it's fine.
I'll do that. I will rant. I will continue to rant.
No, you're fine. I love it. The reason why I ask is because, hey, I understand, like, when people start talking 7 figures, it becomes quite scary. And, like you said, like $1 million, they're like, oh my God, that's crazy. Now you're talking about 3 million, like, oh my God. A lot of people watching this will be like, I don't think, like, I remember before I did my first 7 figures, I was like, that's impossible. Like, I just can't imagine what that would look like. But you are right. You break it down into very small steps and you just work the problem. And if you consistent application towards the goal, you'll get there. And whether that be, spend per month, or whether it would be, should we say, hitting the gym for 40 minutes, you can't really fail so long as you're just doing the right things and hitting the right metrics. And you can ask those people and follow them. Like you said, you shared that Twitter post. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much.
Well, here's the other side of that people don't realize. And I think this is, so how if you look at a picture, you can look at the negative of that picture. That is just like the opposite. Mm-hmm. So when you break down a goal into daily goals, because a lot of people say like, I want to do $1 million this year in sales. If you have not done $1 million in sales, you have no idea how much it takes of buying and finding to get to that million. And if you don't know how much it takes, how can you possibly figure out how to do it while you're doing it? Like when I started exercising, I had no idea how committed and how consistent I would have to be to get just even a result that I felt like accomplished. Like if I feel sick, I still go to the gym. Not if I'm really sick, but if I'm like, oh, I don't feel good today, or I want to eat the cake instead of the boiled egg or whatever. You can't do it for a month and then be like, like you have to keep going and just not stop ever. And Amazon, it was like that. Like when I said I have to buy how much a day to hit $1 million? How am I going to find that? How am I going to find so many things to buy? Well, now the next thing you have to figure out. You have to figure out how you're going to find so much stuff to buy. That's an important piece of spending that much per day, is buying high quality stuff. How do you find it? And that's the thing. Once you know this is how much I have to do, I can't do this right now, you start to figure out how I can do it right now. It almost sounds like I said the same thing, but it's different in my mind.
It's all right.
It's like, it makes it real.
Yeah.
See, a lot of people, if you'd told me at the beginning, you're not going to look decent at all for at least another year and a half, I might have been discouraged from doing it,
Yeah.
But I said, okay, well, I'm just going to make it a lifestyle, and whatever I end up with, I end up with. And you know, the thing is with a goal, it just, if you don't know what it takes to get there, you won't do it. You'll do however much feels okay, and then you'll stop, when really you need double that. Like, you really have to be realistic and say, I mean, this is the objective truth. Like, this is math. You can't change it.
Yeah.
You can't like hope it.
There's a lot of emotional side with, should we say, around business. And I still remember spending my first like $1,000. I was like, oh my God, this is like too much. And like now when we look at even just like one purchase, you're like, what, you spent $1,000? Like, what the hell's going on? Like, it's a very different conversation, and there's an emotional side to it. And I think it's important to understand that there is an emotional element to you, but also as well, you need to look at the logical element. And it's about bringing that emotional up to where the math works. And you're like, okay, now I can achieve my goals. If you don't just bring the day-to-day operations up, or the spend, should we say, you'll never hit that goal. And that's going to be a limiting factor, and you see it so often. But business is a game. It's a spiritual game, and you've got to learn how to overcome these like internal hurdles for yourself. Like, that's about doing these things. Question for you, like, we had a bit of a conversation off camera, so I'm going to kind of jump into a little bit of it here. Your revenue on Amazon 2020 was 40,000, then you went 400,000, then you went 1.12 million. Big change. And I know you had VAs, and I know something's recently changed quite dramatically about that whole situation, which we'll talk about in a minute. But can you tell me about your team? Like, how did it change up until, should we say, the recent change that you just done in December? What did you do? How did you do it? And why did you make those decisions and build your team the way you built it?
Yeah, so I hired a ton of sourcing VAs, many of which I came from the drop shipping side of Amazon last year, and I kept adding on to the team, and it was good. Like, the result was good. In December, I made the decision to let most of them go. And the reason is complex. So in December, I started thinking about how I'm doing business. And I asked this question, again, a conversation that we had off camera. I'm asking, like, does this need to be done? Or does it need to be done this way? It's a way that works, but is it the best way? Or should I be doing it this way, right? I'm just simple questions. And I ruminated on that a lot. And I had some conversations with some people who were wildly more successful than I am. I concluded, I think I want to bring my core team not overseas, but actually in the US. And I'm still working through how to explain why, but the basics of it are that the culture difference makes it, let me think about how I want to say it. You're making me think about it. Like, I've only thought about it in my head. I haven't really talked about it. So anything purchasing or sourcing, the VAs did a great job, and I sent them off with a great severance, and I hope there are no ill feelings. I appreciated their time. It was a great team. I just thought I can do this better, and I can have a smaller team that I pay more, that hopefully I can kind of keep within my family. Like, my sister works for me full time. She's salaried. She's kind of like my right-hand person. So, and we're in a sense building the company together. And I mean, my hope is to train her up to like replace me one day, right? To put all of my knowledge in her head, and she can carry on building the business in the future. And then we have somebody that assists her. And I have the idea of, I have family members that are really gifted. The job market is really tough. They're working excruciating hours and making nothing. And I have the ability to pay them more for doing a job that they would be really good at, that would help me a lot. And I like the idea of having somebody that I can communicate with during daytime hours. They're not up overnight. The culture difference, I found it difficult working with the VAs. I kind of just, the point is, I didn't like it. There are some things that can be trained into somebody who you've hired overseas, but I wanted them to kind of already know. I feel like that would be what's better for my business. Because for me, it's not all about like how much money can I make in how quick of a time. It's how I can have the best business that suits me and that I think is set up for like longevity. Like, I want to be in this thing for a long time. And so it was complex. And I talked to a seller who does many, many multiples of what I can even imagine doing. And he had kind of like the same thought. Most of his staff is in the US, and the US people have overseas assistants that handle more administrative or checking and things like that. So this was kind of a missing puzzle piece when I thought, okay, there are some things. Now, first of all, I hired my first employee that was overseas from an agency, but it wasn't an agency that specialized in like Amazon sourcing. So, and then all of my subsequent hires were kind of referrals from people that I'd already hired. And what I discovered is that if we're talking mainly about like Filipino employees, they have a very good, very specific skill set, and a lot of it creates very good sourcing results. But the niches and the strategy that I wanted focused on my business, I don't feel like was as well suited with their skill set. So am I being too vague? Because, well, it's people use overseas sourcers, and I've heard both from India and from the Philippines with great success. And I personally, like, I was experiencing great success. That was where it was really difficult. It was, is this the success I want? Do I want to do something different? And how am I going to do it? And that was hard because when you have something that's working really well and you just decide you're not going to do that thing anymore and you're going to do something different, it's kind of scary. You know what I mean? It's like, am I throwing it away? I built the company by myself, and I think it was a smart decision because worst case, I could sustain the company by myself for at least a short time. But it was difficult. I'm very cognizant of the fact that these are people's livelihoods. My severance can only take care of them for so long. They were like, we worked alongside each other. It was difficult. But in the end, I thought, I think this is the best decision for my business because this is what I want my business to be. And this piece doesn't quite fit. And if I keep going in this direction, eventually I won't be able to turn back without severe consequences. And I might feel like I sold out to what I wanted, if that makes sense.
There's it's interesting for anyone who's getting started. When you first start on Amazon, the primary goal is exactly what you said. I need money. So we focus on that objective. And then what you get to is you get to a certain point whereby you're now making enough money and you understand the business. And you now start developing systems and you start making more money and you're like, great. And then you start making more money than you really need. Like, yeah, you can buy a nicer house, a nicer car, not a problem. But like, you kind of like, if that's what's going to make you happy, fantastic, and you'll keep going down that route. But a lot of people actually are saying, no, I want a better quality of life, or I want to do something which has an impact outside of this, and I want it to have a bit more meaning. And when you see those people around you, like your family, for example, like you said, they're doing something they hate and I can provide, I can give an opportunity, that gives you more value than the extra money would making sure you're having a Filipino team. What you start doing is you start changing your focus from one of, I need to make as much money as possible, is like, I'm okay with the money now, but now I'd rather make a difference to people around me. And no decision is perfect, and there will always be negative and positive consequences on it. And for you, and the way I look at it, and obviously I don't know the exact answer, but the way I look at what you're saying is your business is making you money, you were happy with it, but you saw suffering within people who you really cared about. And what you wanted to say was like, I can help you. And you decided to restructure your business around providing that. And you saw, you saw, number one, an opportunity to help people around you. Number two, you saw an ability to say that I think also I can get a competitive advantage by doing this, by bringing certain elements in-house. Should we say there's a culture gap? I certainly understand that. I work with a number of VAs. But again, it's like, at the end of the day, the one thing I love about this business that we do is the fact that we get to make the decisions. And we also live and die by the consequences of those decisions. And that's business at the end of the day. You make these decisions, and by the way, like, you don't have to go to $1 billion. You can go, I'm building a business and I'm happy here and I've got my family, it's fine. I'm not saying, by the way, you're talking about 3.2 million this year, which is going to be like incredible. I think you're like the 0.8% of people in the Amazon space. When you hit that, that's going to be incredible. I have no doubt that you're going to achieve it. But I think I share with you and I share for the listeners is the fact that when you first start, it's about money. And then once you generate enough money and more than you need to have a nice quality of life, then you start changing your priorities, or you reevaluate or reorder those priorities, and money isn't as high as we think. And I do the same equation with my own staff. I say money is an important factor in what you do, but if I were to offer you 5 times the amount of money I'm currently paying you, but I said your job would now be to clean toilets all day long, would you do it? And they'd say, no, not in a million years. So what we understand is that money is an important consideration because you wouldn't work for free, but it isn't the only consideration. And when we make our decisions in business, there are more than one factor, and money isn't one of them. Money is part of it, but not the only factor. And I think that's the way I see it. Does that help?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. I reference like tweets I wrote because my Twitter is almost like a journal. But when I somewhere around this, and because people who are listening, they can find these things too and see exactly what I said. But I put out a tweet around when I let everybody go. Not everybody, but when I let the large majority of them go. And in December, about my thoughts why I was changing something that was already good. And part of it, have you heard the story of how Steve Jobs, when he was designing the iPod or the iPhone, he wanted the inside of it, the way that the components were layered, to be beautiful. He was like a minimalist designer. He wanted them to be attractive, even though 99.9% of people would never open up an iPod or an iPhone and see how beautiful it was. He had this obsessive desire for being excellent for the sake of being excellent. And I think there's a really cool idea there. And I've carried that. I didn't actually get my idea from Steve Jobs, but that's the example that came to my mind. There's another story, just to amplify that. I think it was, somebody is gonna get mad at me for not knowing my art, but the Sistine Chapel, Leonardo da Vinci, right? Was that Leonardo da Vinci?
Don't quote me, maybe. I'm not 100%. Okay. Yeah.
Whoever painted that, I heard a story once or read in a book that he was painting like one of the darkest corners of it and paying painstaking attention to the detail. And somebody said, why are you spending so much time there? Nobody will ever know. And he said something like, God will know, or I will know. Think about that. If you do something sloppy and nobody knows, are you satisfied with yourself? So the point of it with my restructuring the way I do business is I looked at it and I said, okay, this is giving me a result. It's money and it's pretty hands off. Like it was nice. And now I'm a little more hands on because I have to be. Because I'm carrying out this, eventually I'm going to be back to hands off again, but for now I've got to pay attention because I'm putting in something new. I can't leave it alone. And I'm looking at what I have and I say, is this what I want? And can I do it as well as I want to do it? So I want the inside of my company, my systems, my books, my numbers, like everything about the way we do business. I want it to be beautiful, like the inside of an iPod. I want it to be organized, and I want anybody who knows how it works to say wow. Not so that they can say wow, but just from the satisfaction of having something that has no excess pieces and that runs smoothly and has very few incidents of issues, and that does the job that it's intended to do. And it was kind of the idea of the original tweet that I put out was, or the reason I'm changing everything is because I got a result and it was good, but I didn't feel like it was excellent. And I want to do something that was excellent just because that's an accomplishment that I can feel myself. Like it's not for anybody else, it's for me. It still gives me the same result. I'm still going to make money from it. I'm not trying something crazy. I'm not like Elon Musk and trying to go to the moon, or go to space or whatever. I'm just building a company. Like I'm 99.9% sure whatever I'm doing will work. I wanted to do it so that I could get the result, but I could also feel good about how I'm doing it. That was important to me.
It's interesting, as entrepreneurs, and you might not think it, but we are creators, and it's a creative process building things. As we build it, and especially when we hire people, we create cultures. And what you're doing there is you're creating what's your culture.
Yeah, that's it.
And interestingly, your company is a reflection of you. And I said, it's while I have a vision of what the company wants, what I really understand is actually me. Like, what do I want? And it's always a reflection of me, and that's an important part. I'd like to just quickly go back, because I'd like to do two things.
Sure.
You had a very successful team. You've done 1.12 million. Can you tell me, what was the structure of it? You said you had a lot of sourcing VAs. How many? What are the roles, the positions? How many did you have in each position? How did it operate? I'd like to understand that, and then I'd like to talk about when you're planning to go, if you know, should we say, with the family, because I really enjoy systems and structures because they give you a framework to operate on, and also you had a very successful structure.
Yeah, the structure of my employees was less impressive, I think, than the structure of the processes that they carried out, because the employees essentially were just kind of like worker bees for the design of the hive, right? They're just the processes are made so that everybody knows, this is my job at this time, this is what I'm doing. And so there's me, I'm kind of at the top, right? Any big decision I'm making, but I created my company processes so that there would be very few big decisions and only little decisions. And every little decision, there's no mystery as to who does that. Everybody knows, and everybody knows where to find information, and they know that this is done on this day. And everybody has autonomy within their role to make the company better. but it was basically two sides of the company. There was me here, and then if you split it down the middle, there's any sourcing and purchasing. So we have the head, like the manager, and she was in charge of training newbies, keeping eye on performance, numbers, and then kind of lateral to her was the purchaser, because she really wasn't, like, I was kind of overseeing the sourcing and the purchasing and the operations. And then over in the operations, kind of the head of that side is my sister, who has her own, just one person underneath her that helps. It's like an administrative thing. So if there's a shipping issue, if there's an account health issue, that's all on the operational side. So that's okay. So here's how I see it. The only thing that's important in Amazon FBA is buying stuff and selling it profitably. That's like literally the only thing. But you think that's not the only thing I'm doing. There are other important things. You have to monitor your account health. You have to have things shipped and prepped and returned and all this stuff. Yes, that's the waste product that comes from sourcing and selling. You wouldn't have account health issues if you weren't selling anything. That's the only reason it exists. You wouldn't have a whole bunch of cardboard if it weren't for buying things and selling them, right? So the only thing that's important is finding profitable items and selling them. Everything else is a waste product. So I divided it up. We've got one side of the company is finding profitable things and selling them, and the other side is handling the waste product. That's it. So the way it was structured, you fall into one of two categories. And then there's like, so on the sourcing side, there was like training, getting better, sourcing profitable items, buying them, and then managing the repricing of it, which is mostly done by software. But anybody who has a ton of SKUs knows you can't just, as you can make a repricer very automated. Mine is extremely automated. I hardly ever touch it. It still has to be reviewed regularly. You've got to move through your inventory. Pricing's very dynamic. So that has to be managed. That falls within a role. On the other side, you basically got everything else, like literally everything. Liquidations, account health, customer service. There's two sides to it. That's the way I see it. Sourcing and then everything else.
So question for you, you had sourcing, purchasing, makes money, and then you had ops. Ops had sister and one VA. Under sourcing, you had a manager. What was the structure? What did that look like?
It was manager. Well, it was technically, you could technically put it in three buckets because purchasing was like its own place, its own person, one person full-time purchasing. Manager, and then just everybody underneath that sourcing. So part of the reason about making it excellent, one of my, I was seeing, I guess I probably won't name him, but I was seeing someone in the Twitter sphere who had probably the same size team as I was around that, and finding like maddening numbers of things to buy. And so I looked at my team, and so the first thing that put in my thought, the thought in my mind of, is this the right direction for me, was my manager, who was tasked with learning everything from me, who I spent a lot of time with, her and the purchaser, and passing that on to training within the team, I don't think fully fulfilled that obligation, because performance started going like this and then it flatlined. And regardless of what I put in place, I never saw a great improvement of that over time. And that got me, like, there are ways to solve this, but the longer you do it, the further we're getting away from that point of return, right? So that was the original thing that I said, like, what is the disconnect here? So just a tip to anybody who wants to hire a VA, I always tell people, if I could go back in time and do it all over again, I would pay the money to buy a VA from not buy a VA, but to have one, yeah, that sounds bad, to have one sourced, to have one placed into my company by an agency who's already trained on FBA. Because I did like all of the training, and it was a lot of work, and it was a big time investment. I would rather have paid the money, because the time, I'm paying for the time. And then in the end, I ended up going in a different direction. I would have rather lost the money than the time in changing my mind. Money is renewable, time is not. And it was stressful because I feel I'm like, these people need to get inside my brain, But how do you do that? Because the way that when I source, I am really successful. I can get on in live source and find products, and it kind of looks like magic. But again, it's the conversation we had earlier about the way that I assimilate information. There is a way to show people how to do that, but they're not going to get it immediately. And some might not get it at all. They'll have to figure out their own way to do it. They can still do it. And that's a lot of time when you're paying somebody, and it's still kind of a gamble. Yeah. So
if I come back, I love structure. structures. Like I like to draw org charts because org charts allow me to understand functions, and then functions allow you to understand measurables between roles. So you talked about ops, System 1 VA, the finding and sourcing, which is two parts, manager, which manages all the sourcing, and then you've really got a purchaser, which is 1 VA. Is that right?
Correct.
And then under
it wasn't
the manager,
a very complicated org chart.
That's right.
It's very simple.
And how many staff under the manager did you have? How many like sources?
I like off the top of my head, I really don't recall the exact number at the peak. It was probably 7, maybe. So going back to seeing other people and their staff outperform me just by observing like numbers. And how I believe, and I don't want to blame my manager VA, but there was doubt as to whether she fulfilled that obligation because she was so good. She's so good at sourcing. She finds amazing items, like incredible. And I want to see the entire team replicating that performance. It should be replicable, but it never fully was. It was like hit or miss. And I should say too, the purchaser had a dual role. So I have to give credit to Trader Soros for this because I think I got the idea from him. I just can't remember when or where. But the missing piece in my organizational structure for a long time, for a good amount of time, was a reviewer. And that was somebody who goes through, reviews all the leads, and then the purchaser purchases. So if you had 2 people, the reviewer would be above the purchaser. And for a while, I was the reviewer. And that was the biggest job to try and train into a purchaser, was how to review, because you've got to read a Keepa chart really well. And you've got to know the warning signs for IP issues. And there's kind of a lot that's a case-by-case basis that you can't exactly develop this really rigid criteria for. So that section, shout out Trader Soros for that.
I know him. Good man, honestly.
Yeah, but the reviewing, so I ended up creating a criteria that I still adhere to today, and I advise everybody create a criteria, even if you're a one-person show, and that's saying these are the aspects of the Keepa data that are important. And when you meet these aspects, this is how much you buy. So if like we had a rating system, and if it was a 6, we don't buy it because it was a mismatch, or the 90-day average price was not profitable. It was just a brief window that it was profitable or whatever. We'd never rate anything a 7 because a 7 is not good or bad. So a 7 might get put in onto a lead because it needed to be reviewed because they weren't quite sure. And then an 8 is you buy a test amount. A 9 is you buy, or like just enough to get free shipping. So it was kind of the bare minimum, 30% ROI, $3 profit with prep cost included. And then maybe it sells, maybe it's in like the top 2% or below, something like that. A 9 was a step above that, higher profit, higher ROI, more sales velocity. A 10 was like the top lead, and it's like you want to buy 30 days right out of the gate. We take the risk because the data's that good. And so by doing that, I recommend people do that even if they're the ones reviewing, because it takes the thinking out of sourcing. When you think about the criteria beforehand. This is what works for me. This is how I'm going to purchase when I source. And then when you're sourcing, you don't have to like hem and haw about, do I buy this? How many? Because you're wasting energy that you need to use sourcing. So you see the criteria, you say, it's an 8, and then you buy 3. And then you see the next one, you're like, it's a 10, and you buy 25. Yeah. And you don't have to, it removes the thinking. You kind of become a robot that you've programmed yourself. It's
a really good point. And the reason why I say it's a really good point is, number one, when we go through the buying process, we become quite emotional in it. Like we use emotional logic, it's emotions really, to make our decisions, not logic. And what's interesting is when you just follow a formula, you can see the effect of that formula when those products come to sell. And if the effect is negative, then you can go back and change the formula, and that will have a positive impact. But when you're becoming emotional about your decisions, there is no logical thing that you can change because you're trying to change your emotions at the sale. Once you realize something's gone wrong, how do you change emotions? I'm going to pump myself up before I do some purchasing. Like, it just doesn't work. So
I spent months creating like a formula and trying it for a month, and then going back and changing it and trying that for a month. It's like the longest process of my life because
I love it. So
you can't see the result. You have to wait to see if it works. You can't just be like, it's been a day. You have to wait 45 days and then evaluate that entire period. And then if you have to go back and change it, you have to wait another 45 days.
I know it's that feedback loop loop is so important, and the
Yeah.
ability to your feedback loop is your learning mechanism. Iterations. That's a really important point.
Yeah.
So, question for you:
Sure.
you've got again org structures. Me and org structures are like cookies and cream. I don't know. You and then you've got the ops, which is your sister and one VA. Then you've got the actual business side, making the money side. Should we say you've got your manager and 7 sourcing VAs. Do you have one purchaser and one reviewer, or do they do the same role?
Same role.
Fine. Okay, that's cool. Now, obviously, that's what it was. Changed now. I'm not going to ask you what it is now, but have you thought about the vision of what the org structure looks like going forward?
Yeah, so it's very basic. I'm still working through it because, again, I love the internet and the communities, and I love seeing people who are doing like way better things than I am, because it lets me know what's possible and it gives me ideas. So I said, can this be better? Can it be excellent? Can it be more of an accomplishment? Can it be beautiful? Poetry. How lean of a team can I have and still achieve the same result or even better? So for me, it's all about leverage. If somebody else can get the same result as I am with half the people, it makes no sense. Because for me, it's not about the monetary expense of hiring people. It's about why would I have? It's more people to manage. It's more people to talk to. It's more people to care about. It's just more it's not necessary. I'm not a minimalist, but as you can tell by the action behind me, but I just want things to be as simple as they need to be. So my idea, based on what I've been able to do by myself in the past, is that you've got one person who manages the purchasing and the repricer. Because purchasing, like if you're considering an 8-hour day, every day you might need to spend, if you want to be really active with moving your inventory and keeping your pulse on it, like an hour, maybe 2 a day on the repricer, and then a bulk of that actually doing purchasing, and then maybe 1 to 2 sourcers who are autonomous, who report. They kind of just, they have a job. The system's already there. I want it to be really lean, because I think that with the amount of things you're able to outsource, that you can have like well into the millions in sales with a really small team. The first thing I'm doing, kind of the first start of my plan, we're outsourcing all of our returns and liquidations and everything, which is most of what's behind me. So in the past, things have come back. We've sent it back into Amazon. We've listed on eBay. We've sold it to local liquidators, which I've been able to develop relationships with, that'll just take things off my hands. I want to do away with all that because it eats up a ton of my sister's time. It eats up a ton of my time, because she's like, what do we do about this? And I'm like, I don't know. What do we do about it? Like, why is this happening? So getting rid of that entirely frees up a ton of time. So I'm taking it in steps. My first step will be to hire somebody in the US who I already have a person picked out. I'm already talking to them about it, to do purchasing and managing the repricer. And then they will have somebody that assists them, that's overseas, that on an administrative level, so that I think that's the structure I want to go with moving forward. Okay. And then I have to take it a step at a time, because I kind of have to see, okay, how does this feel now? Are we is any more needed? Because I kind of if nobody's overwhelmed, we don't need anything else. If somebody's overwhelmed, there's something needs to change. We need to outsource a job to something, to an agency or something like that. We need to get rid of something that we don't need in the first place. We need to change a process. Like whenever you're overwhelmed, the first step for me is, instead of adding something, maybe we need to take away something. So it's very step by step. I'm completely fine with playing the long game. I think we can still hit our goals. I've got enough hours in the day to do whatever I have to do. But yeah, that's as much of my vision really as I have.
So if I clarify, because again, I love org structures. You have purchaser who does repricer. Under them, you have one assistant, should we say, to help them out. Alongside them, you have 1 or 2 sourcers, and then you probably still keep your sister to do the non-revenue generating, like the administrative side. Would that be correct?
Operations, sure.
Operations. So I'd probably say a team of what? Would she still have an assistant as well?
Yes.
So a team of 5, 6 maybe?
5, 6.
Plus you.
I really think it's hard for me to see the future and know is any more needed. And I should add, the business itself is changing a little bit. I have a catalog of over 50,000 leads that makes replenishing extremely efficient. And new leads don't have to be sourced as much as they used to. And then transitioning into wholesale is assisting with that. So it's kind of like, can we do the same with less work by just tweaking it a little and opening 20 wholesale accounts? Like, how much work work is needed. And another thing too, I talked to a guy a couple of weeks ago. He did about 3.5 million last year, somewhere along those lines. And the conversation we had was, because he was thinking, do I keep trying to grow this? Do I inject more capital? Do I keep feeding it? His profits are really good. And it's kind of like, I mean, if you're taken care of and everything's good, like why? Like if you have the desire to grow it because it's fun, sure. But at some point, are you going to have to take unnecessary risk or headache or stress to grow it? And if so, you need to ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Like I had the VAs, we're purchasing a ton, we're sourcing a ton, building the catalog. It's helped me a lot now. And I had leads list. I had a decent amount of people who really enjoyed my leads list. I thought I couldn't do it as well as I wanted to. That's why I stopped, because if I don't want to do something that's mediocre. I tried it. It was okay. I didn't think I did a good job. So I stopped doing that, and I just didn't want to manage like a ton of people. It sounded like too much. I thought I could still make a living and not have a bunch of people in my organization. You know, I kind of keep harping on that point, but to go back to our initial conversation,
you want to go.
I want to make the most amount of money with the least amount of work. I don't want to do the least amount of work. I don't want to make the most amount of money. I want to do both in a way that's balanced, in a way that, like, I'll never be a billionaire. I'm not willing to do whatever you have to do to be a billionaire. Those people, they're genius. They sacrificed for 20 years. They made desks made of Home Depot doors or whatever. Jeff Bezos is the, like, I won't do that. I won't ignore my family, which I feel like most billionaires had to do to build $1 billion company. I'm not willing to do it. Will I be a millionaire? I think so. But do I have to be? Like, it's not really that important to me. I want to feed my kids, and I want to spend time with them. That's like all I really want. And hang out at the beach and maybe go on vacation, like little stuff. But it took me thinking like, oh, I have to build really big, which I kind of still want. But there's going to be a point where I'm like, I don't think I need to go further than this. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree. Well, hey, I really appreciate obviously everything you shared, and I appreciate time as well, because my God, we've been talking for some time.
I talk.
So, question for you is right.
Thanks for your patience.
That's right. If anyone wants to get in contact, what's the best way to do it?
The easiest way, hit me on Twitter at Oliver Flips. Feel free to send me a DM if you have questions. A lot of people reach out. I'm really responsive. I like to talk to people. A lot of people get new ideas when I do something like this, or they enjoy hearing the story. I try to be really transparent and open, and I think that helps a good amount of people. So send me a DM, and if you want to sign up to my email list, there's a link in the bio of the Twitter that you can do that, and I send out emails every week on tips, tricks, mindset, stuff like this.
Fantastic. Well, what I will say is, obviously, if anyone's interested, I will put the links down below, so obviously you can just click through and straight to them. So absolutely fine. But Joseph, or Oliver Flips, as obviously you're known socially, I just want to say thank you so much for everything you've done, shared, and obviously I'd love to be in contact in about a year's time, and hopefully see how, number one, the business has changed operationally, org structure, but also as well revenue-wise, and also how your life has changed, because I know there's a lot going on personally as well. But I just want to say, for myself and everyone watching, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for sharing. Take care. Bye-bye.